Developing listening skills in a foreign language is one of the most challenging lessons for both teachers and students. The following slides will help teachers get acquainted with the North Star books and activities, as well as provide one example of a listening lesson designed to help students strengthen their listening skills. The North Star listening and speaking books are broken up into 8 units. Each unit will have 2 full-length listening activities that are accompanied with audio recordings. The audio can be found on the North Star website for teachers, but internet availability is not always guaranteed in the classrooms, which is why we highly recommend that teachers download the recordings to their computers or mobile devices. Listening 1 contains a vocabulary section that should be done before the students hear the audio component. Each unit has a main ideas, details, and make inferences section that goes with the first audio. The end of the first listening has an express opinion section that is used to generate discussion. Listening 2 is usually shorter than listening 1 and only consists of vocabulary and comprehension sections. After listening 2, there is a Connect the Listening activity that helps students find connections between the 2 listenings. The extended vocabulary activities are excellent homework assignments that students can do to reinforce the new vocabulary discussed in the lesson. The grammar section of the listening and speaking book is done on the same day as the reading and writing grammar, which is usually done earlier in the week. Pronunciation and speaking skills sections are the last activities that we cover in the book. Each unit has a different focus for pronunciation and speaking skills. Some of these sections are not covered every week. It is important to refer to your unit plan when organizing your class time, so you will know what to spend time on and what can be passed over. The final speaking task and alternative speaking topics are a good practice resource for students to use when thinking about possible speaking exam topics. There are several reasons why students find listening as the most frustrating and intimidating skill to practice. For one, the speed of the audio is out of the student's control. Unlike reading and writing, the students don't get to choose how fast or slow the information is given to them. Native speakers also tend to cluster words and sentences, or use slang and contractions that can throw the students off. It is much harder to distinguish individual words and phrases in an audio format as opposed to a text. Add in new and unfamiliar vocabulary, and the students can get completely lost. Finally, students often rely on more than just audio cues to determine meaning. They use facial expressions and body language to help them interpret a speaker's intention. Without these nonverbal cues, students really struggle to accurately understand a listening activity. You'll find that most of our students don't look forward to the listening lessons in our schedule because they often feel frustrated and lose confidence. It is important to break up the listening activities into manageable chunks so students have time to really comprehend the material. Listening skills lessons can be defeating and frustrating for teachers as well. It can be a challenge to keep students focused and motivated, especially if the audio is about a topic that the students just don't care about. If you find your students' interest fading in the lesson, you can try adding an element of competition. This can be as simple as having students compete to see which group can take the most notes or define the most new vocabulary. These students are very competitive and enjoy simple contests like these. Another frustration for teachers is that some of the activities in the book are not presented well. For example, there might be a listening skill that requires students to determine if a speaker is surprised or not, and it might not be clearly distinguishable in the audio, even for native speakers. It is moments like this where teachers will have to improvise and read the transcript themselves so students will have a good example. And now for the lesson example. I have used material from Unit 8 in the Purple Listening and Speaking North Star book. I usually need about 2 class periods to complete this lesson, including time for discussions. The first class is used to prepare students for the actual listening exercise. We talk about the main themes of the unit, go over any new vocabulary, and make predictions about the listening. The second class is focused on listening skills practice. This is when I will play the audio and answer the questions in the book, followed by reflection and discussion. The first thing we do is spend 3 to 5 minutes discussing the topic. This is where you can find out how much your students already know about the topic and what needs to be explained in further detail. This is an important step to get all of your students on the same page. It can be intimidating for students to jump into a listening exercise without having any background knowledge on the topic. Next, we take a look at the vocabulary activity. I usually assign this page as homework the night before to save time in class. Your students will be tempted to just complete the activity and not actually read the text. I usually take about 2 to 3 minutes to quiz my students about the text by asking them questions they should know if they read it. There's a lot of good information in the vocabulary text that will help students better comprehend the listening activity. Another trick I have picked up is to go through the transcript of the audio that can be found in the back of the listening and speaking book. I go through and find words that I know my students will struggle with. In this example, the words highlighted in pink are new words for my students but aren't part of any of the vocabulary exercises in the book. I write the sentences that use the new words on the board and underline the word I want students to focus on. I ask them what the part of speech is for each word, then I have students try to guess what the meaning of the word is by using context clues. After they make their guesses, I have them look up each word to see how close their guess was to the actual definitions. Students then get into their groups and create new sentences using the new words. This activity can be modified depending on how much time you have in your class. It usually takes my class 10 to 15 minutes to complete. After the vocabulary exercises, it is time to set up the board. I break up my board into 6 sections. While you are setting up the board, your students can read the main idea and details questions in the book and highlight key words that they need to listen for in the audio. The first box, What We Know, and the second box, Predictions, are done before the students hear the audio. What we know consists of information that the students are certain about. For example, the preview section tells students who is speaking and the type of listening they will hear, such as an interview or a game show. This information would go in the What We Know box. After the students hear the preview and read the questions, they can make predictions about what information they think they will hear. I also have my students try to guess the answers to the questions in the book. It usually takes 3 to 4 minutes for my students to complete both What We Know and Predictions. After the first 2 boxes are completed, the students close their books and get their notebooks ready. Now you can start the audio. I usually break up the audio into 2-minute increments. This makes the activity a little more manageable for lower-level students. Once we've listened to the full audio, the students will share their notes with their group and elect 1 student per group to write their notes on the board. While the notes are being written on the board, the students that are at their desk work on answering the questions in the book. This usually takes 5 to 7 minutes. The Think About box is designed to add open-ended questions that get students thinking more deeply about the material. These questions can be added to the board while the students are reviewing the questions in their book and preparing to listen to the audio for a second time. Teachers can come up with these questions on their own or use examples in the Express Opinions section of the listening book. The Express Opinions questions can be found after the Make Inferences section in the book. After we listen to the audio 2 to 3 times depending on the needs of the students will check their answers for the main ideas and details questions with their group. We go over the questions in the book as a class, then I have the students take 3 to 4 minutes to talk about the Think About questions in their group. While the students are discussing the Think About questions, you can add questions to the React and Relate boxes on the board. These questions are to get students thinking about their own opinions about the listening and how the topic of the listening could relate to their own experiences. You can spend as much time as you want on these questions. Remember, there is still the Make Inferences section that needs to be completed for Listening 1, which usually takes about 7 to 10 minutes to complete. Finally, it is extremely important that students practice their listening skills outside of the classroom. Here are some helpful websites that you can direct your students to that will help them practice their skills at home.